the fifth thing you want to do as you are preparing for your short-term mission experience is to make sure that you are ready to talk through a translator. Now, of course, if you're going to a place where you speak the language or the language there is the same as your own country, then this doesn't apply. But many times as you're on a short-term mission trip, you will need to talk through an interpreter to communicate with the people there. And this is a little bit tricky. So it's important that you practice this. This is what I encourage you to do. Find someone who speaks a different language. It doesn't have to be the language of the people you're going to. Find someone who speaks a different language than you, who may be someone who is bilingual, obviously, and have them help you talk in such a way that they can understand. Translation work is really, really hard. Languages don't match up perfectly. You want to make sure that you have prepared and practiced what you're going to say so that an interpreter can take your words and translate them effectively for the people you're going to be communicating with. It's amazing. There are lots of people who do this in the business world and the educational world where they practice working through an interpreter. But I find that many people working in ministry or on short-term trips never consider that this might be a difficult task. So again, find someone that you know, whether it's someone in your neighborhood, your community, your church, who is bilingual, and pull them aside and just say, hey, I'd love to practice with you the idea of talking through an interpreter. Say what you might say when you're overseas and let them give you feedback on whether or not what you're saying makes sense. Sometimes we talk and we think it makes sense and everyone's going to understand and they'll be able to easily translate it. Quite frequently, I find that's not the case. Frequently, what we say doesn't make sense to someone who speaks a different language. And it's really valuable to practice beforehand and have that person say, hey, if you say that, that might not translate. That only makes sense to an English speaker in your context. Quite frequently when we talk, things get lost in translation. But if you practice ahead of time, you can actually avoid that. This is so important that we're actually going to spend some time in this course in a future video talking specifically about things you can do when you're talking through an interpreter to make it more effective. If you work through this and you practice, it'll make your conversations with people overseas far more engaging. The sixth thing you want to be doing when you are preparing for your short-term mission trip experience is tackling medical questions and also asking the question about whether or not you're going to be taking any vaccines. Now, we know there is some controversy and disagreement amongst different people around the topic of vaccines. We do not want to push you one way or another. That's not our goal. Regardless of your philosophy or your ideology around vaccines, we simply want to encourage you to make sure you consult with your physician or a medical professional about the things you're going to be doing when you're overseas on a mission trip. You want to see a doctor and ask or tell him, hey, I'm going to be doing these sorts of things, or here are the types of things I'm going to be facing. Here are the types of people I'm going to be corresponding with. Here's the climate or the culture of the region I'm going to be in. Those things are important because your physician will be able to give you advice as to whether or not you should take certain medications or not. Some places in the world, things like malaria are very real and very prevalent. You want to make sure you're taking malaria medication in those moments. And then in other cases, there are actually some countries that require you to take vaccines before you even enter that country. For example, Ghana requires you to have a yellow fever vaccine. They won't even let you in if you don't have it. If you show up at the airport without a yellow fever vaccine, you're not going to get in. That would make for a really bad day. So again, you want to make sure that you consult your physician and know exactly what you should do or what you shouldn't do. Again, we're not trying to push you in one direction or another. We just want you to think through what the ramifications might be if you choose to take vaccines or certain medications, or if you choose not to take certain medications or you abstain from taking certain vaccines. The seventh thing you want to be doing as you're preparing for your mission trip is making sure that you pack well. Now, this is one of those things you may be thinking to yourself, well, duh, but it's always amazing to me how frequently I go on a mission trip and people have come unprepared. So as you're packing, you want to make sure you understand certain things, like what's the climate of where you're going? What's the temperature going to be like? What's the humidity like? You want to make sure that you are well prepared for any scenario or any climate or any weather patterns that may come up while you're on the field. You also want to ask your contacts, what sort of activities are we going to be participating in? Are my clothes going to get dirty? Should I bring laundry detergent? Again, you want to make sure that you are well prepared for any scenario that you may end up facing. You want to ask your contacts things like, how many pairs of shoes should I bring? Will they get really muddy? Will they get really dirty? Can I get by with just one pair of shoes, for every single day, as well as for church on a particular Sunday morning or whatever day of the week the culture you're in is deciding to worship? You want to make sure you're prepared for every scenario that may arise. In addition to that, there's a variety of things you want to think about bringing on a trip with you. Things like making sure you have enough medications. I always bring things like Tylenol and ibuprofen, even NyQuil and cough syrup or cough drops, things like that. For gentlemen, I want to encourage you to make sure you bring medications to address things like jock itch or athlete's foot. For ladies, I want to encourage you to bring feminine products. Even if you don't anticipate needing them on your trip, I would still encourage you to bring them just in case. We just want to make sure you are thoroughly well prepared and think through every scenario you may be facing so you are well prepared anytime you engage in any particular activity. The last thing I'll say about packing is this: make sure you pack as light as possible. Now that sounds a little bit opposite of what I just said, because I just told you to bring a bunch of stuff and be well prepared. This is what I typically do the night before a mission trip. I set everything out and I look at it and I think to myself, can I just cut away 30% of the stuff I'm looking at right now? Can I cut away 40% and just get down as much as possible? You don't need to change your clothes every single day if you're not going to be very dirty. Maybe you pack enough clothes for half your trip and you bring a little bit of laundry detergent. Again, every scenario is a little bit different. It's going to be case by case. But the bottom line is this: you want to be as well prepared as possible, and at the same time, you want to pack as light as possible. I promise you, when you get in country, carrying a heavy bag around or having too much stuff will get very cumbersome. Pack well, pack light. You'll have a much better experience. Number 8, this is a really, really big one. Before you head overseas, you want to make sure you do some research on missions movements as a whole. Now, this is a little bit different than studying the culture or the region, but you want to know what sort of missions work has happened in that particular region of the world. It's good to know before you head into a country what percentage of Christians are there. It's good to know what percentage of missionaries are there in that country. How long has the gospel been there? You want to research things like missions organizations and what types of things are they doing. Are they liked and have a good reputation in that country? Or are they not liked? Maybe they have a bad reputation in that particular country. You want to just do a lot of research on things that are happening in that nation, specifically within the realm of gospel work or missionary work of any sort. When you are well prepared in terms of understanding what's going on in that country, it will help you engage with the people a little bit better. If you understand what denominations are doing work there, or what sort of theological convictions have been popular in that nation, again, it will just simply set you up to have better conversations with people. I'd encourage you to go to websites like the Joshua Project, or simply just do a quick search engine, just do a quick web search, and just look up for things like missions movements in blank country. Right? If you're going to the nation of Kenya, you do a search for missions movements or missions organizations in Kenya, and you'll see dozens and dozens of organizations pop up. Just get a feel for what's going on in that nation. Again, as you are doing missions work there, it'll simply give you an opportunity to have better conversations with people you meet along the way. Number 9. Now this one seems like a really big one, and I think a lot of people, for the most part, typically do a good job on this one, and that's doing religious studies. Figure out what is the typical religion of the place you're going to. If you're going on a mission trip to Mexico, where you're going to be corresponding with mostly people who come from Catholic backgrounds, you're going to want to be prepared for that. And that's going to be very different than, let's say, you're headed to someplace in Southeast Asia where the culture is predominantly Muslim. That's a very, very different type of person that you're corresponding with. You want to make sure you do extensive religious studies. There's loads of YouTube videos and videos on the internet out there, books, podcasts. There's so many different curriculums and resources available to do religious studies. There really is no excuse to be ignorant of these areas. There's really no excuse for you to go into your country unprepared. One quick thing I'd like to add to that, just consider maybe finding someone of that religion, if you can find someone in your particular community. I remember back in 2008, before I went to the nation of Thailand, I knew I was going to spend 2 months there. So I decided I was going to go find some Thai people. So I went to a restaurant and I started hanging out and talking to some of the servers, the people who worked at the restaurant. I started asking them about Thailand and asking what they believed, and they began to tell me that they were Buddhist. But then as I began to do more and more research and more study, I began to realize that the people of northern Thailand, specifically where I was going to be, actually have a lot of religious beliefs that are a mixture of animism and Buddhism. So I would research that, and then I would go back to the Thai restaurant, and I would talk to the people and ask them questions. And I would ask them things like, hey, if I say this, would this be offensive? Or does this make sense? I would practice some of my gospel presentations and some of my evangelism techniques and thoughts with them in conversation, and I would get their feedback. It was extremely helpful. When I went to Thailand, I felt like I was much more effective in ministering to people who lived in northern Thailand because I had really done extensive research before, and I had corresponded with someone from that part of the world. Now, I recognize you may live somewhere where you don't know someone that's from the part of the world that you're going to. That may not be realistic in every scenario. But I want to just encourage you to do the best you can, to be very proactive, to learn as much as you can about whatever religious beliefs are prevalent or prominent in the particular region you're going to. The more prepared you are, again, the more effective you will be in ministering to people there. The 10th thing you want to be doing when you are preparing for your mission trip is pray. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, I thought that was number 1. It was number 1, and it's number 10 because it's really, really important. The top 10 things you'd be doing, you should start and end with prayer. I'll say it again. Pray, 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 pray. Again, for things like team unity, team health, logistics, for your ability to minister the gospel well, for the hearts of the people you're going to be talking to. Pray for people you're going to be sitting next to on airplanes and buses. Pray for your teammates. Pray for your leaders. Pray that God would do amazing things. I want to tell you this. God is sovereign. It means He's in control of everything. And if you ask Him to do something, He will listen to you. If you ask Him, Lord, would you go ahead of us and do the work in the hearts of the people we're going to be corresponding with? I promise you, He will actually do that. And it will make a significant difference. God wants you to be effective on this mission trip more than you want to be effective on the mission trip. Let me say that again. God cares more about your effectiveness in missions than even you care about your effectiveness in missions. God cares a lot. He cares a lot about you, and He cares a whole lot about the people you're going to and you're going to serve and minister to. If you pray and ask Him to go before you, I promise you, He will do it. I want to encourage you to pray as much as possible, even multiple times a day if you can. But pray every single day between now and the time your trip starts. Pray every single day that God would use you and would work through you. Pray every single day while you're on your trip. And then even pray when you get home. Continue to pray that God would continue to work in the hearts of the people you minister to. Pray for your teammates. Pray for everything that God is doing. I promise you, if you pray, God will use your prayers in a profound manner.